and phrase the answer. Perhaps the question should be, what should be the role of educated or intellectual people in the United States? Now, does that sound like a better question?
That's a fine question.
In an interview or on a ship, Hyman George Rickover likes to take command. Even at 84, the admiral can inspect a submarine with the agility of an ensign. In Rickover's mind, these are his submarines. He designed the reactor, he trained the men. 1 out of 4 admirals commanding ships today was trained by Rickover. His nuclear empire became known as Rickover's Navy, and it ran solely Rickover's way. And you just thought that the rules of the Navy were silly.
I don't know, but I never read the rules. I prohibited it. We never had a book of Navy regulations in my office. I prohibited it. One time some guy brought it in. I told him to get the hell out and burn it.
Because you wanted them to think.
I wanted them to think that they knew what their job was. They didn't need a book of regulations.
How can you run a Navy if everybody in it acts like you do?
I never told the others how to act. I acted my own way, my own genius.
But you know they said that you were unaccountable.
I was 100% accountable. If anything had ever gone wrong with the nuclear ship, who would they have pointed their finger at? What they mean is I would not do all the things they asked me to do. I did the things I thought was right.
But that's not working within the system. Isn't that what the military is about?
My job was not to work within the system. My job was to get things done to make this country strong.
What he got done was this: the Nautilus, the world's first nuclear-powered submarine, launched in 1952. The machine that would change military strategy forever. This submarine could stay underwater for months. Rickover stunned the world by building the Nautilus from scratch in only 5 years, leaving the Russians far behind. Many people called him the best engineer the Navy ever had. Today, there are 141 ships in the nuclear fleet. Once, there was just the man and his obsession with science, not saluting, with engineering, not command. What drew you down into the body of the ship to learn about why the cranks cranked and the...
Oh, for Christ's sake, what the hell is there about standing up and saluting and dressing up in uniform? You can put dummies to do that job.
That's why you became an engineer?
Well, I was in the Navy and I could do more and I could learn more. I couldn't see myself just standing off to the deck watches and saluting and all that nonsense.
But why did you work so hard?
Paid for it.
No, why did you work...
I would have worked hard at any job. No job I ever undertook that I didn't work hard at.
Why? Why did it all matter?
That's what's in a human being, to do the best you can under any circumstance.
What is at the heart of leadership? Is it in personality, charisma?
No. For example, I have the charisma of a chipmunk. So what the hell difference does that make?
It was certainly not his personality that won Rickover 3 Distinguished Service Medals. And to celebrate the Nautilus, a ticker-tape parade came through the streets of New York, a long way from the tiny town in Russian-occupied Poland where Rickover was born, the son of a tailor. A long way for the boy who landed at Ellis Island at the age of 6 and grew up in a ghetto in Chicago, and won an appointment to the Naval Academy at Annapolis. He was terrified he wouldn't make it. He became the class grind. Did you ever go out on dates?
No.
Did you ever go to dances?
No.
Did you ever go to the movies?
On Saturday night occasionally. I studied girls. I was so busy trying to get by and stay alive that I didn't worry about girls. You can get along without girls. Yeah. Don't wink at me.
Was it a very snobbish atmosphere?
No. Sure, everybody got hazy there at that time. I got probably somewhat more than the average. So what? I was mature.
Why did you get more than other people, you think?
Because I was Jewish. We didn't have any. Very rare for a Jew to go to pay with that. You know, an interesting thing that later on, many years later, when I had high rank in the Navy, one or two of those, I was going to use the word bastard, came around and asked me for favors. Those who had treated me that way.
You remembered him?
Of course. And the most pleasant thing was in becoming an officer and going to a ship and seeing the mature adult attitude in which one was treated as compared to that lousy boys' school.
Today, that lousy boys' school has a science building named for Rickover. Inside, models of his submarines and the testing devices he invented. Rickover's science and the Rickover superstition is supposed to be good luck to rub his nose, the one on the statue. And how about the Rickover stories? The admirals who run the Naval Academy remember being grilled by Rickover when they applied for admission to his nuclear sub-school.
One young man there came in long hair, and I told him he had to choose between the long hair and the girlfriend. He walked out and said, my girlfriend likes this ponytail. That was the end. The little son of a bitch here got them to cut it all off and got no wig.
I heard that you had people come in and you sat them down in chairs which some of the legs were shorter than
No, not only two. I saw 6 inches.
Oh, just
two. Only two. And it was difficult because it was a shiny chair and it kept on sliding off. So they had to maintain their wits about them while they were asking these questions while they were sliding off the chair.
And what about those that you brought in and they'd stand in the broom closet?
Well, they came in, they gave stupid answers, so I thought I'd give them a chance to think. I put them in there for a couple hours, 3 hours, and gave them plenty of time to think.
But what were you trying to do with these young men?
I was trying to draw out of them what they had potentially in them.
A young ensign from Georgia eluded the broom closet but couldn't escape Rickover's demand for excellence. But did you hate him? A little?
There were a few times, yeah, when I hated him. Because he demanded more from me than I thought I could deliver.
James Earl Carter hated him, revered him, and became his commander-in-chief. Is anyone his boss?
I never really felt like his boss, although he would say that I was. I'm not sure that he ever acknowledged it really deep down in his heart.
Carter and 4 other presidents would intervene to keep Rickover on active duty 20 years past his retirement date. The Navy was not pleased. It had been trying to retire Rickover as far back as the year he launched the Nautilus. His fellow officers were tired of his abrasiveness and contempt for regulations. But Rickover had taken care to build alliances in the White House and on Capitol Hill. In a public relations tour de force, he cultivated members of Congress by asking their wives to sign the keels of his submarine and by turning his launches into lavish photo opportunities for his congressional supporters. He valued their protection. They valued his blunt testimony.
What do you think is the prospect then for nuclear war? Well, I think we'll probably destroy ourselves. So what difference will it make? Some new species will come up that might be wiser than we are. I do not believe in divine intercession. In the eyes of the Lord, we are not the most important thing in the universe.
The Reagan administration finally forced Rickover to retire in 1982. Nearly everyone said he was too old. But after 64 years of service, he didn't even receive the courtesy of a call.
My wife told me it's on the radio that you're fired. That's how I found out. Yeah. That's how the Navy notified me, by watching it on TV.
Were you surprised when the Reagan administration told him goodbye?
No, because the defense contractors were out to get Rickover for a long time. He was an embarrassment to them, and he was part of a one-man watchdog.
There was over $1 billion worth of claims by shipbuilders, which I thought were false, and I fought it. Now, it's quite a complete coincidence, but within a month or 2 months after I left, most of that money was given to the shipbuilders. Of course, that's a coincidence.
The shipbuilders did hate him because he refused to pay them and because he demanded perfection. He said they didn't know ships from horse droppings. And now, Rickover has been charged with taking presents from the shipbuilders. A former executive from one contractor, General Dynamics, was the first to reveal that Rickover had been given gifts. A lot of them, some of them expensive.
Oh, they gave me little plaques. They gave me all kinds. One time, I think, I even got a small diamond the time I was married. But the question that so did others. I don't deny it, but the question that ought to be asked is, did I ever favor General Dynamics or any other contract? The question is whether it influenced me.
But how can an American citizen know whether it influenced you or not.
I didn't think about the views of the American citizen. I was governed by my own thoughts.
In fact, Rickover requested a lot of the gifts so he could give them to members of Congress who supported his son. Expensive gifts, and not just the keychains he picked up off his desk. Why do you think this has come out now?
On the kind of
General
claims,
Dynamics.
I accuse them of false claims.
General Dynamics.
And I always stuck to them.
And you think this is just a little revenge they're taking on you?
I don't care. They're not taking any revenge on me. I have my own conscience. Do you think I was crooked when I was in office? Do you think the public thinks so? Because I got.
But do you worry that at the end of this long career that something like this is raised and your ethics are questioned in the press?
It doesn't bother me. I think God knows what I did. And I don't care what the contractors or you think.
What Rickover admits to caring about is American education. Over the years, he has given $100,000 of his own money to educational projects. And now he's raised some $200,000 for a foundation of his own, the Rickover Science Institute, which brings 60 gifted students to Washington each summer for intensive study. What is it that you think the gifted children most need that they're not getting into the
They
schools?
need the exercise of their brain. They need not to be kept inactive, not to let their parents run around and have a good time. The primary function of parents in this world is to raise their children to the best of their ability. They're not doing it.
Okay, well, I agree with you in that we need to invest more
Thank
money.
you very much.
And sometimes the educator can't resist being the admiral again.
You better talk up because the audience is not hearing what you're saying. Start all over again and talk up. Yeah, use all your equipment. Come on.
If Rickover is hard on parents and kids, he's also hard on an institution he fathered, civilian nuclear power. This is the plant at 3 Mile Island. Rickover built the first civilian nuclear plant. He says nuclear energy will be necessary for the future because Americans are squandering their resources. But he worries that the plant technicians are not being properly supervised, and he worries where the nuclear discovery will lead.
One of the most remarkable things that he ever told me was when we were together on the submarine, and he said that he wished that the nuclear explosive had never been evolved. And then he said, I wish that nuclear power had never been discovered. And I said, Admiral, this is your life. He said, I would forego all the accomplishments of my life. And I would be willing to forego all the advantages of nuclear power to build ships for medical research and for every other purpose of generating electric power if we could have avoided the evolution of atomic explosives.
What's the biggest threat in the use of nuclear weapons? Is it the Russians?
It's always somebody else.
Of course.
And you might think maybe it's both the fault of both of us. Where I sign here? Why don't you write your initial? People will always remember how you look. They'll never forget.
You won't even accept the bureaucracy of signing your name
I
out.
never have. Even in the Navy and the military, I'll do that.
You don't agree with the rule?
Any rule that I like, I agree with.
Rickover walks 4 miles a day and works 11 hours, arranging fundraisers and speeches. Here with the director of his foundation, Joanne DeGennaro. He's also working on a book, kind of summation. The text will be taken from these notebooks, 100 volumes of thoughts and ideas Rickover has written and collected through his lifetime.
It says Dean Atchison.
And among the volumes, a glimpse of the private Rickover, a man few people other than his second wife, Eleanor, know. The love letters he wrote to his first wife 50 years ago. This is you were on a submarine, and you were, read this to me. This is so terrific.
Forgive me for not writing more. I am so tired. Above all, though, there is the clear thought of you and of my love. Your vision is ever fresh, smiling, and lovely. Your lightness and alertness contrasts with my drowsiness. Good night. I shall fall asleep with thoughts of you as my lullaby. Is that a good one?
The letters his first wife wrote back are gone. Rickover says he burned them in despair the night she died. You think there's an afterlife?
I don't know. I've never talked with any of the people there. I don't know. Never met any yet.
You don't think it likely there's a heaven and a hell?
I don't give any thought to that. I think you make your heaven and hell right on this earth. You should act on this earth as if it were heaven.
A footnote on those gifts that got the Admiral in such trouble. The Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman, said that the censure of Rickover should not overshadow his many achievements. It was just that a Navy Admiral should be held to a higher standard. In response, Rickover issued a public rebuttal of the charges. He has also called Secretary Lehman one of the biggest fools the Navy ever had.
All right, so there was Admiral Rickover. He's an interesting guy. Let's go through and talk about the 5 types of social power that we talked about, French and Raven. Here they are. And we'll ask you not what he has, because it's pretty easy to understand what he has because he's an admiral, but what you thought he exhibited on a day in and day out basis, and our options will be high, medium, or low. So, expert power, what do you think? High, medium, or low?
High.
Very high.
He was brilliant, very smart guy. Legitimate power.
High.
High.
He clearly used his legitimate power. He's an admiral. Coercive power.
That
I would say high.
I say
Yeah.
medium.
Like he was seen as abrasive. He would put people in a broom closet for a couple hours if they gave a stupid answer. So he certainly used a lot of coercive power. What about reward power?
Low.
Low, yeah. It didn't seem like something that was much into positive reinforcement. All right. So finally, referent power.
Low.
He wasn't charismatic, but then in a way he was, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough.
And like, yeah, he always got his way, kind of.
So for some of you, I'm seeing low, some of you medium, some he was high and low. So we'll put a question mark by this. I know I didn't list that as an option, but
I would say he has referent power indirectly because he had a lot of influence with a lot of people, right?
So we'll put a question mark there, right? Because you make a good point, but for some people, he's like no, none, or low. So we'll put a question mark there. What does that tell you about referent power?
It varied.
Right, it's subjective, right? It varies. So some Martin Luther, Dr. King, yeah, referent power. I don't know who to argue with that. But there's some people where it's much more subjective. Things like Admiral Rickover, some of you are yes, some of you are like definitely no, some of you are like in the middle. So it really can vary.
Professor, I have something to add to that. I think kind of even the way that he kind of drove the conversation showed some referent power. Like, I think it was kind of funny when he said, like don't wink at me. Like,
right.
And then the girl was still like, like, it was weird, like, the way that he was having the conversation with the girl. Obviously, she was attacking him, but he was, like, in a way kind of using his charisma to kind of get away from all of it and paint himself in a better light.
I mean, he's clearly, knows, clearly is an admiral. He clearly is in command. He clearly is savvy. And how he dealt with Diane Sawyer, and probably how he dealt with a lot of people. But he clearly was, so does he have referent power? Maybe to some, and not to others. Again, I think it's subjective. Someone can be in command and still, and exhibit some of the behaviors that he did and not be charismatic. Okay, so they maybe are more controlling or something like that. So not necessarily, he's not necessarily charismatic because of those things, but again, some people might see that as, and might see him as charismatic and some people don't. So it is subjective, and there's a range, and so we saw someone who most people say is charismatic or has referent power, which is Martin Luther King, and then here's someone where people would say, some would say yes, and some would say no. And if we saw Jimmy Carter earlier, the former President Carter, and most people would say he has low referent power, even though he was a president. All right, so let me ask you this final question. How many of you would want him as your boss, would want to work for him?
Not me.
Nope.
So several people are saying no. Some people say yes. Some of my students that were in the military, they're quite comfortable with this. I had a student who, her dad actually was in the Naval Academy and worked with Admiral Rickover. Worked for Admiral Rickover, and she said that when she saw this video, she talked to her dad, and her dad said the video was a pretty accurate representation of what he experienced. So, and it's interesting. All right. Let's now look at Admiral Rickover and talk about organizational politics. So politics refers to the use of influence of whatever type to get what you want at work. So the use of influence of whatever type to get what you want at work. Yeah, kind of like a drill instructor in some ways, but he was crazy smart. Anyway, so the use of influence of whatever type to get what you want at work. What was 5? I guess there wasn't. I guess that should be 6, huh? Let's see, 5. Yep, you're right. So, I went to the beginning. 4, 5. So it should be, yeah, it should be 6. So thank you for that. There's a mistake. None of my lectures were on PowerPoint before this pandemic, and then I had to put everything on PowerPoint. So thank you for pointing out these mistakes. All right. So now we're on 6. So the use of influence of whatever type to get what you want. Could be an individual, could be a team, uses their influence to get what they want. All right, so let me ask you this. Was Admiral Rickover good at organizational politics?
Yes.
He kept his job for a really long time.
Yeah. I mean, you might say, well, he got fired. True. But he got fired after 64 years of continuous military service. He hung around longer than anyone in history. Okay? Military history. You might say, well, he was old. It's because he was old. That wasn't it. Think about it. Did the Navy want him gone?
Yep.
Yeah, they've been trying to retire him for almost 30 years. So if your company wants to fire you, and you hang around for 28 more years, I would say you know your way around. So how did he hang around and have influence for that long? What did he do?
He made friends.
He went above their heads.
He made friends in high places, right? As you're suggesting. What did he do with the gifts that he got from the contractors?
Hook those friends up.
Right, he re-gifted them, right? He gave them to members of Congress. He gave them testimony, had these photo ops, and he did a lot of things to maintain influence and get what he wanted. He was very politically savvy. Let's look at his personality. It's not about him per se, it's about you, but we'll apply it to him. Well, there are a lot of ways personality influences political behavior. We'll just, since this is not in your book, we'll just deal with one. And that is your friend, your old friend, locus of control. I say it's your friend because you know what your locus of control is, since we filled that scale out at the beginning of the semester. So so you can be more of an internal and more of an external. So what would you say Admiral Rickover was? Would you say has more of an internal locus of control or external locus of control?
Internal?
Internal.
Yeah, definitely internal. He's the one who didn't want to stand off on the side and salute and stuff like that. He wanted to do stuff, and he saw himself as being able to make a difference and being in control, and that's certainly the way he behaved. So, taking that idea and applying it to research on locus of control, personality, and political behavior, who's more politically active at work? Internals or externals?
Internal.
Yes. Internals are more politically active at work than externals. Because an internal thinks, hey, I can make a difference. I can influence the environment. I can influence what happens at work. So internals are more politically active than externals as a group. Am I going through this too fast?
No.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so they gave the scale that you filled out. This study was done a while ago with college students. They gave the scale that I gave you earlier, the locus of control scale, to college students, as well as a scale measuring ethical standards. Who do you think had higher ethical standards as a group? Internals or externals?
Internals?
Internals had higher ethical standards than externals. It doesn't mean if you're more of an external, you're unethical. No, I'm just saying there were differences between the groups. All right, let's put it together. Internals are more politically active and at the same time have higher ethical standards. Now, for some people, externals are less politically active and have lower ethical. Now, some people, this doesn't make sense. This sounds counterintuitive. Why might this finding seem counterintuitive? What's the assumption about political behavior?
The majority rule wins.
Well, it might be the case. So is ethical behavior, so internals are more political, but then they have higher ethical standards? For some people that doesn't make sense, because what
politics is corrupt?
Right. So I did that already. So here's what you're suggesting. Here's an HBR article, 2017, politics is a dirty word. It says, but often politics are unavoidable. As Aristotle noted, man is by nature a political animal. So, right, so politics has a negative connotation. And this HBR article says politics is a dirty word. So it may be counterintuitive if we think that politics are bad or dirty. It certainly has a negative connotation. But are politics bad, good, or can they be both?
Both.
Both. Okay? Politics are politics. You're using your influence to get what you want. Okay? At work. You or a group of people, your department or whatever. Now, obviously we can think of instances, hopefully not from our personal lives, but from things we see, things we've heard about politics being used for bad. But it can be good, right? You can use it for good stuff. So you're a manager, you have an employee that's been passed over for a recognition. Use your influence to get your employee the recognition that he or she deserves. That's good. Or divisions, departments have to compete for resources. You use your influence to get your unit, your department, your division, whatever, resources for some product or service that benefits your company. Okay? So that's good too. And the authors of the study said also that because internals believed that they had a greater impact on the environment, they felt a greater obligation to behave ethically. Whereas externals thought, what I do doesn't matter, therefore I'm kind of free to do what I want. All right, questions about the relationship between locus of control and ethical standards? All right, let's do this. You seem kind of tired there. So let's do something I read about earlier in the week about online learning and memory. Let's just take 10 seconds, and I'll do it too, to stand up and stretch. It's supposed to help us remember stuff. So I'll do it too. So Just stand up and stretch for about 10 seconds. Blood circulating. Take a quick break.
I'm so gassy today, bro. I don't know why.
Whew. All right, sit back down. This is ridiculous. It's crazy. All right, so I'm guessing a lot of you stood up and stretched. Now, why? Because you asked us to. But think about it. If someone else in the Zoom meeting had said, "Hey, everybody, I want you to stand up and stretch," would you have? You would have. So another student stood up in class and said, "Hey, everyone, I want you to stand up and stretch." You would have? No. Most of you are like, no. You'd be like, and you are... But you did it when I asked you to. Why?
You have authority.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Actually, it's meant to show you this next point. The difference among these three things: compliance, conformity, and obedience. Now, this stuff is not in your book, so pay particular attention. So that's meant to demonstrate our next point here. We're going to talk about these three things. First, we'll get to conformity. Now, conformity is something that we know well. I'm going to give you a definition for these three things that's kind of parallel with a tweak in it. So here's the definition of conformity. It says you behave in a particular way as a result of unspoken group pressure, real or imagined. You behave in a particular way as a result of unspoken group pressure, real or imagined. So I'm going to say something, do something, wear something as a result of unspoken group pressure, real or imagined. Real meaning that I know people want me to do something or say something or wear something or whatever, or I think they do. So, like politics, does conformity have a negative connotation?
Yeah.
Yeah, people are like, oh, you're conforming, and okay, it kind of has a negative connotation. Is conformity, like politics, organizational politics, good, bad, or it can be both?
It can be both.
It can be both. Like politics, it has a negative connotation. Okay, we can all think of instances where conformity is bad, but we can also think of instances where conformity is good. Let's say you start a new job, you get a corporate job, and you're just starting out. Is it important to fit in and conform with your new colleagues? Yeah. Okay. Oh, so we're at 7. Yeah, thanks. I need to edit that. There we go. Oh, so someone mentioned mask wearing. Yeah, so mask wearing would be conformity, right? So if everyone around you has a mask on and you don't have a mask on, people will kind of look at you like you're going to feel pressure that you should have a mask or you should leave or whatever. That's conformity. So, like, when I worked at IBM, when I started there, no one needed to tell me what to do. I just looked around the people that were there, and these were executives, and they were successful, and I behaved like them. It's part of fitting in. It's part of blending in with the culture. So that's good. So conformity, even though it has a bad reputation, negative connotation, is neither good nor bad. It can be both. Okay? It depends upon the situation. I mean, you do it all the time. So if we go back to the College of Business, do you remember what the building looks like? We go back to the College of Business, and let's say that you need to go see a professor up on the 3rd floor, and let's say you take the elevator, which I know is like horrible now to think about being stuck on an elevator with other human beings. Anyway, so remember when we used to ride in elevators? So you get in the elevator, and which way do you face? Do you face the doors, or do you walk in and face everyone in the elevator? You face the door, right? Now, what if you did this? What if you walk in and face everybody in the elevator? Now, don't do this because it freaks people out. You're going to make people uncomfortable, right? They're going to be like, turn around, turn around, turn around, like you're going to freak them out. Now, you're going to feel the pressure to conform. They're going to look at you. I mean, no one's going to say like, dude, you're supposed to turn around. But we just do this. We conform, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right. If someone in class said, another student said, hey, everyone, I want you to stand up and stretch, and you did, that would have been an example of compliance. So, like I said, we're going to have a parallel definition for these three things. So, compliance is when I behave in a particular way, and this time as a result of a direct request from someone who does not have authority over you. So I'll say something, I'll do something, whatever, this time as a result of a direct request from someone who doesn't have authority over me. So if another student said, hey, everyone, I want you to stand up and stretch, and you did, that would have been compliance because they're on the same level. If you did it when I asked you to, that would have been obedience because for a little while, I have a little more power because I'm teaching the class right now. And then in the semester, that'll be gone. So if another student stood up, that would have been compliance. Another coworker asked you to do something. That's compliance. They're on the same level as you. Tonight at dinner, let's say you live with someone, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, lover, whatever, friend, I don't know. Anyway, so you're with that person, your friend says, please pass the salt, and then you give it the salt. That's compliance. You're on the same level, right? Unless you have some like weird relationship where you're different power. Compliance. Now, getting someone to do something if you're their boss is much easier than if you're their coworker. So how do you get compliance? How do you get people to do something when you don't have power over them? You don't have authority over them. That's what we're going to talk about now. Before I go on, any questions so far?
No.
Okay. So what we're going to go through is some techniques for inducing compliance, or whatever, compliance gaining techniques. And I'm going to talk about two approaches. One is a direct approach, which I'm a big fan of. And a direct approach would be you just flat out just ask for what you want. You want something from someone, you want someone to do something, you just directly, honestly, straightforwardly ask them for something. Would you do this? Can you do that? That's a direct approach. Now, if you look at political strategists and salespeople, they sometimes don't use direct approaches. They use kind of tricky tactics, which we'll call indirect approaches. And what happens here is I try to get what I want by asking for something else, which sounds kind of odd, but remember, direct approach, you just ask for what you want, you make that direct request. The indirect approach, you try to get what you want by asking for something else. You ask for something else to set up asking for what you want. So I'm going to go through three examples, and there are a number of them, but since this is not in your book, I'm just going to go through three examples of trying to get what you want by asking for something else. And these are indirect. So the first one is a pretty famous one, pretty well known, the foot in the door technique. And so what happens here is that you start by making a small request. You have someone do something small, and then you wait, and you go back and ask for more. So, again, it's indirect. You try to get what you want by asking for something else. I ask for something small to set up asking for something that I really want larger. So, again, you're trying to get what you want by asking for something else. So, ask for something small to set up asking for something larger, right? Like salespeople, and I guess some of them just had this marketing, which is good. All right, so let's say that you want, you want money from your coworkers. Okay, so for, I don't know, you want to save, I don't know what you want to save. All right, so you don't want to save anything. So let's just say you want to save baby seals. All right, so you want babies. So what you want is money from your coworkers to save baby seals. The direct approach would be going to your coworkers and saying, "Hey, could you give $20 or whatever to save baby seals?" That's a direct approach. Indirect approach, foot in the door technique, is this: you go to your coworker and you say, "Hey, can you help out? Would you mind signing this petition to save baby seals? Or could you wear this button with a little baby seal on it that don't club me?" Well, who's going to be against baby seals? I mean, so most people would do that. You're like, "Thank you so much," and then you wait 2 weeks, and then you go back to the person that signed a petition or wore the button. You say, "Oh, thank you so much for giving money and wearing that button, or signing a petition or wearing that button to raise awareness. What would really help now is, can you give some money? Can you give some money to stop the crying of the baby seals?" Okay. Now, research shows you're more likely to get money with this approach than the direct approach. Which is why people use it. Now, so it works. That's why people use it. Why? So what is the psychological mechanism that drives the effectiveness of this technique? Why do you think it works?
My marketing professor said, like, when you ask for something small, you already put that person like in the state where they've been willing to help you. So when you ask for something a little greater, then they're already kind of likely to help you out again, type thing.
Yeah. So if I helped you before, what's a consistent thing to do? Help you again. Okay. Do we have a need as human beings to be consistent, for our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions to be consistent? We do. So if our thoughts or feelings or actions are inconsistent, it creates this uncomfortable feeling called dissonance. So one of the explanations for why this works is cognitive dissonance. I helped them before, but a consistent thing is to help them again. I guess I am committed to saving baby seal. I guess so. So we have this, it works because we have this need to be consistent. So that's the foot in the door technique. Let's talk about effectiveness of it in terms of what works best. So you can probably guess. So here are two approaches. I can try the small request and immediately make the large request. Or I can do the small request, wait for some time interval, and then go back and ask for more. Which of these two is most effective? Small and immediately large, or small time interval large?
The one where you wait.
Yep.
Yeah, wait.
This one is the most effective. This one works. Small and immediately large works, but not as well as small time interval large. So one is more effective than the other. The time interval is more effective. So it's kind of interesting. Again, the first one works, but not as well as the second one. Let's see, other examples of this. This is a technique that I see all the time in my job. And I'll tell you where. It is with this. This is your textbook. Do you recognize it?
Never seen that book in my life.
Yeah, okay. All right, so if you were to buy this brand new, exactly, thank you. What book is that? Thank you. Okay, so if you were to buy this brand new, how much would it cost?
Probably like $60. Oh,
brand new.
Well, I don't. Well, you gave it to us, so my perception is kind of weird.
All right, let's say a brand new textbook. A brand new edition of a textbook costs how much? Roughly, ballpark. $200 maybe? 150, 200, something like that. I mean, not for this. I'm having you use an older book that's somebody got free online. So, but anyway, so imagine if I had you buy a brand new textbook. Okay, let's say it costs $200. Well, do the math. I have 200 students, and multiply that by $200 per book. Okay, now you see how much money we're talking about here. That's just for me, for one professor. Multiply that by multiple professors at a university, and then universities in Southern California, and then you get it like across the US and across the world. It's huge money. Now, I don't get a single penny from this. Like, I get nothing from this book. I'm not a co-op, I'm not an author of it. I get nothing from your book. There's nothing, I get nothing from it. I just try to find a book that I think is good, and I obviously go the other way and try to find a book that you can get for free or get really cheap, because you don't have a lot of money. But if you think about it, I don't get a commission. I get nothing. I don't get a single penny from you using this book. And if I did, I certainly wouldn't get you one. I certainly wouldn't recommend one that you can get online for free, right? Whatever. So that wouldn't make any. I wouldn't be very smart if I did that. So anyway, so I don't get a penny from this book. But the point is this: it's big money. Okay, again, not for me, but for the publishers. So the way it works, actually, there's no incentive. So the way it works is this: book publishers have book reps, and they come to campus, and they try to get us to adopt their book, so you buy it, and they make lots of money. I know some professors get a cut from a textbook. Not me. Sometimes if you are like self-published textbooks, or if you're a co-author of the textbook, but I've never received a single penny from adopting a book. That's not what I'm into. So anyway, so you can see these people about the time when professors have to choose books for classes. Go around on the third floor, once we can go back to the college business, and walk around. And if you see someone that's really well dressed and really attractive, not a faculty member. I think you know that. It's a book rep, right? And their job is to sell to us. And so what typically works is, how it works is this: you get a knock on your door. Hey, Dr. Arnold, do you have 30 seconds to talk about textbooks for the fall? Now, do they want 30 seconds?
They want more.
No, they want more. If you let them in your office, there's no getting them out. Like, you could start a fire and they would die in there with you trying to sell you a textbook. Like, there's no getting them out. I know, because this is happening. And they'll try to spend as much time in there as they can. They'll flatter you like, hey, have you thought about writing a textbook? And they'll turn their head like, oh, interesting. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. All this stuff. Now, they used to do this to me, and then I just got fed up with it and called them on it. Now they don't come by anymore. So what I would do is, like, this happened last semester. So I'm like, hey, Dr. Arnold, do you have 30 seconds to talk about textbooks? And I'm like, sure, you got 30 seconds. I got my phone. All right, go ahead. And then 30 seconds are up, and they're like still in the middle of their spiel. I'm like, oh, nope, sorry, gotta go. And like, no, but I'm like, you asked for 30 seconds, I gave you 30 seconds. So don't get mad at me. Like, you wanted more time, you should ask for more time. And they get all pissy. And I'm like, whatever. Like, I gave you what you asked for. So it turned out they don't come by anymore, which is fine. Like, if I need a book rep, I'll throw a quarter in the hallway. Sorry, probably just did. I hope none of you are book reps. Anyway, but they're just using a technique, and I just diffuse it. And I have a friend who's a book rep who works on campus and said, well, for this campus and other campus, like, yeah, that's the technique we're taught. All right. The opposite approach is called the door in the face technique. What you do here is you start with more than you want. So you start with a large initial demand that they're not going to do, and then you substitute it for a lesser request, which is what you wanted in the first place. So you start with a large initial demand that's likely to be denied. So you know they're going to say no to it. And then you're pretty sure they're going to say no to it. And then you substitute it for a lesser request, which is what you really wanted. Remember, it's indirect approach, trying to get what you want by asking for something else. So you start with more than you expect to get, and then you substitute it for something smaller, which is what you wanted in the first place. Let's say that you want, I don't know, you want next Friday off. Let's say that let's say you're actually employed, which is hard these days. So let's say you want next Friday off of work. And so the direct approach would be going to your boss and saying, can I have next Friday off? The door in the face technique would be like, oh man, so much going on, I'm so busy. Can I have next week off? Your boss is like, no way. You're like, well, how about just Friday then? Now, research shows this is more likely to work than the direct approach. Not this specific instance, but this approach is more effective than a direct approach. Now, why? Why is this approach more effective than a direct approach? What's behind it? Not guilt, kind of though, like it is manipulation because you might feel guilty because I asked for a whole week off and then you used to know and I went down to one day. So if I give some, what should you do? You should give some, right? So what is that called? If I give some, you should give some. It's called the law, the rule of, it's not compromise per se, it's called reciprocity. You can think of it as compromise, but I'm looking for the law, the rule, the norm of reciprocity. If that's pretty dominant in our culture. If I give some, you should give some. And as people are suggesting here, that happens in negotiation, right? So you make a reasonable offer, I make a really high offer, and I'm like, oh, let me come down some. So if I come down some, you feel obligated to go up some, I get a better deal for myself. So that's why people make the first offer in negotiation, usually, although not always, do better. Okay, because I anchor you, and then I go down, then I expect you to go up, and if I anchor you high, I get a better deal for myself. So yeah, it's like the anchoring effect. Here's a comic. Calvin Hobbes isn't in print anymore, but I'm old, so I really like this stuff. Here's have you heard of Calvin and Hobbes? Am I really out of touch?
Yeah, I know Calvin and Hobbes.
Okay, so there's slightly all right. No, that didn't work when you did the negotiation exercise because you weren't negotiating with a person. You're negotiating with a computer. All right. So anyway, there's door in the face technique. Now, actually, my son tries to do this to my wife and I. Not this specific instance, but we have we have treats, like chocolate stuff, like chocolate covered pretzels. And so my 4-year-old will come to us and say, like, as soon as we touch the bag, he's over there. Like he's got some extra sensory perception. Like he knows when a bag of snacks is open. But anyway, so we open the bag and he's there. And he's like, can I have 5 pretzels? And we're like, no. And he's like, okay, I'll just have 2 then. Like he's trying to use the door in the face technique. It doesn't work. It's cute and a little kind of disturbing that a 4-year-old knows how to do this. But anyway. Any questions about what the technique is? All right, the last one we'll talk about of these techniques is called the lowball technique. This one's a little more complicated. It's like the foot in the door in some way, but here's what happens. You get someone to verbally commit to something smaller. You get someone to verbally commit to something smaller, and then you show how that is not going to work out, and you make a higher cost request. So you get someone to verbally commit to something that's smaller, and then you show that's not going to work, and you make a higher cost request. So it's like the foot on the door when you go from low to high or small to big. It's different in that in the foot in the door, you actually do something and then you raise it. Here, you just verbally commit to something. When trying to buy something, I lowball them hard, and it's like, okay, so here's an example. So let's say you say, so it says lowball technique, pitching an attractive offer and then increasing the price. So only 200. Wow, I'm in. 15 minutes later, well, that excludes taxes. Fine. Oh no, fine, I'm still in. So you get them to verbally commit to something. I'll do it, and then you say, there are a few more things that were actually added on or something like that, and you got them committed, so you up it a little bit. That's the lowball technique. I'll give you an example of this. Another example. A friend of mine writes textbooks, not ones for this class, but and psych textbooks. And he found out that the PTA did this to him. What they did was this. So he got a call from the PTA and like, hey, Doug, can you bake some cookies for the kids? Some sort of like Halloween dance or party they're going to have in the gymnasium. Like, can you bake some cookies for the kids? And my friend Doug's like thinking like, sure. Like, in his head, it's like you go buy the log, you cut it. So he agrees to do it. So 15 minutes later, after he gets off the phone with them, they call him back and say, Doug, thank you for helping out. We realize that we have enough people baking cookies. What would really help is you can come decorate the gym. PTA, lowball. They did that to him. He found out through the grapevine that they're having a hard time getting people to decorate the gym. So they're calling people first to get them to commit to baking cookies and then telling them they already had enough cookies and then ask them to bake to decorate the gym. PTA cannot trust them. No. I mean, I'm sure you can trust the PTA, but this is what they did to my friend Doug. And things kind of get around, and he found out that they were using a lowball technique to get him to decorate the gym. All right, and the last one is obedience, which we already talked about. So obedience is like compliance, but this time you behave in a particular way as a result of a direct request from someone who has authority over you. So you do what your boss says because your boss has authority over you. That's obedience. All right. Any questions before we talk about what's in your book? All right, then. If something comes up, let me know. Let's talk about your book. That's the last thing we need to talk about in terms of what to focus on or not focus on for the test. Of course, we have next week, and so we'll look at sample items and things like that next week. Let's go to chapter. Oops, I went too far. Chapter 17, and let's go to page 503. So page 503, chapter 17, exhibit 17.1. You should know the difference between instrumental values and terminal values.
Wait, what page is that, Professor?
503, exhibit 17.1.
Got it. Thank you.
Page 505, exhibit 17.2. So 505, exhibit 17.2. Also on 505, the beginning of 506, it talks about at the bottom rights of passage, rights of integration, rights of enhancement. I sometimes ask about that. So the bottom of 505 going on to 506, it talks about certain rights, passage, integration, enhancement. That's the bottom of 505 to 506. Let's see. 508. Oh, this is not going to be on the test, but per se. But if you look at the last paragraph on 508, it says several sentences down. When Louis Gerstner took control of IBM in the 90s, I'll actually talk about that a little bit because I was there when Gerstner took over control of IBM in the 90s. Anyway, I'll talk about that later next week. That's not going to be on the test. Well, that statement in the book, but I'll talk. Your book talks about it, and I was there when it happened, so we'll talk about it in class. Let's look at the next page, 509. Exhibit 17.3. You should know that on page 509. Page 509, Exhibit 17.3. Page 512, Exhibit 17.4. You should know those types of ethics. Societal, professional, individual.
You say 17.4?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Let's see, on page 515, that section on organizational structure. Actually, all of 515. Because it talks about organizational structure and adaptive versus inert cultures. Let's see. Uh, 517, the traits of strong adaptive cultures. On 518, the section that begins the values from the national culture until the top of 522, you can skip. That's a lot of Hofstede stuff. So 518, the section that begins values from the national culture, until the top of 522, you can skip.
So 518 to 522, skip?
Yeah, 518, the section that begins values from the national culture, until the top of 522, you can skip. So on 522, you need to know the section that begins creating an ethical culture. So on 523, why it happens. You should know why unethical behavior occurs. That's on 523. And then on 524, ways to create an ethical culture. Your book lists several ways to create an ethical culture. Questions about the culture chapter. And of course, we'll look at sample questions next week. Excuse me. So, Leo, that was adaptive cultures. Did he say 507 or 508? Not 507. I was talking about 508. I just made reference to nothing. It's not nothing for the test, but something I was going to talk about. Your books actually mentioned it, and I was there when it happened. So, but that was on 508. Nothing on 507. Other questions? Questions about anything then?
What was the name of the video you played in the beginning? I did have that.
It's just the video of Admiral Rickover. Oops. I went back. Oh, there it is.
Does the video have a name, by any chance?
The video about Admiral Rickover.
Alright, I just want to look at it on YouTube. Just look at it later, but okay.
I don't know if it's on YouTube or not, so it might be since it's on 60 Minutes, but it may take some searching.
Okay, that's cool. That's it on my side.
Okay. Other questions? All right, then we'll call it a week, I guess. So I'll hang around for a couple minutes for those of you who have questions and you don't want to make people wait. But otherwise, please be safe, and I'll see